Hey there, whiskey lovers. You ever wonder what happens when you mix Kentucky Derby winners, legendary bourbon masterminds, and a dash of bold ambition? You get Blackwood Distilling Co., a premium brand born from the wild 65-1 odds victory of Country House in the 2019 Derby. They have crafted luxury toasted bourbon and America's first triple-barreled toasted rye that'll knock your socks off in the most delicious way possible. Picture this: 7 to 9-year-old Kentucky bourbon. Think deep, creamy vibes, soft barrel spices, and that smooth as velvet warmth, kissed by a hint of vanilla from Kentucky's golden era. And that's just the bourbon. If rye's more your thing, like it is for me, how about a 5 to 7-year-old Indiana rye triple-barreled in toasted barrels that blend spice, dark fruits, mint, and a dash of white pepper? It's basically a liquid holiday wrapped in oak and fire. Batches are continuously rolling out in states all across the Union, so if you want in on luxury, head to blackwooddistillingco.com to get yourself some Blackwood toasted bourbon and toasted rye. Cheers to the good stuff.
Today on the Film and Whiskey Podcast, we are looking at the Season 9 movie lineup.
And we will be reviewing Bardstown Bourbon Company, Silver Oak.
This is the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome into the Film and Whiskey Podcast. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And one last time before Season 9, we are coming at you with a special bonus episode.
Bonus episode.
I never know if this is the kickoff of Season 9 or if this is like the very last entry in Season 8.
I feel like it's a kickoff of Season 9.
All right, well, welcome to Season 9, folks.
Yeah, let's go,
dude. We freaking did it, man. We've made it to Season number 9, Brad.
We have. We've made it beyond the Elite 8, if you will. We're just slowly filling out the bracket.
The bracket of seasons. That should be like if we ever get to a Season 32, we should just put every season into a bracket.
Yeah, that would be a great idea. Have everybody vote on their favorite season.
So, with that said, how have you liked these last few seasons? Like, Season 5, I think, should be, like, where we start with this thought experiment. That was the one where we each picked, like, 16 movies for the other person to watch.
I liked that season a lot.
Then 6 and 7, we did our director miniseries. And last season, we did the highest-grossing film in North America for 32 consecutive years.
I think it's been a really interesting few years or seasons in the history of the Film and Whiskey Podcast. I think it was really fun to switch things up, pick some movies that we just loved. Instant classics like Elizabethtown. I mean, just a plethora of wonderful movies.
I still love Elizabethtown. It's terrible.
I know you do.
It's terrible in ways that are like angering. Like, this does not cohere. This makes no sense.
In the same way that Chef fits in that 2012 to 15 genre of like kids explaining social media to their parents, Elizabethtown, I will give it its credit. It captures the late night phone conversation in the early 2000s perfectly.
And it's like one of the last times that could happen, because now it would just be a text conversation.
We've talked too much about Elizabethtown.
All right, fine. What we're saying is Elizabethtown is the highlight of the last 4 seasons of our podcast.
Easily. I think the director seasons were super fun. It felt more like a cinephile exploration of movie history, which was fun for 2 seasons. Last season was a blast, man.
It was a blast. And yet, Brad, as I look at the download numbers for our podcast over the last few seasons, you would think that those movies would be more well-known among the general population and therefore, theoretically, get more listens. But I think people who have tuned into our podcast want us to be reviewing more classics. I think they have latched on to the conceit of the podcast, which is me, the classic film lover, introducing my friend to classic movies. And when we're doing like Sister Act, I don't think people are as jazzed about that.
I don't know, man. True Lies. That is a modern classic.
That movie is a freaking
cinema.
classic. I don't care what anybody says.
Well, this year we're going to be moving from tanks bursting out of walls into a exploration of what does it mean for a movie to not just be a classic, but a modern classic.
This is something that we've been talking about for years and years. I frequently bring up this thing that TNT used to do. Like every Saturday night, they'd have a movie and it was called the TNT Modern Classics. And it was just like whatever Warner Brothers movie was out that they wanted you to see, they'd put it on as a modern classic. But we've talked a lot about what are the criteria that have to be met for a movie to be considered a classic. There's usually some alchemy of either box office success or critical success or Oscar gold that goes into it, or a combination of the three. Sometimes a movie is a complete flop and then it gets picked up later on, but usually it's because critics were championing it in the early going. And so we want to look back at the last 20 years. We're going to cap it at 2005. We'll do 2005 to 2023, 24, and kind of present some films to the general population here and ask the question, does this movie deserve to be considered a modern classic? Should it be added to the 21st century canon? Now, Brad, we should say, before we go too far, we've already done, I just had the number pulled up, like 63 or 64 movies on this podcast that would fall into this criteria, like movies from the last 20 years. So
like
a lot
from 2004 to 2024.
I started in 2005. So 2005 to 2024, we've already done 63 or 64 of these movies. We could do multiple brackets with just these movies. But so a lot of the ones that are already considered part of the 21st century canon, we've reviewed already. Like we've done The Dark Knight. We've done, Social Network and Brokeback Mountain, and like all these movies have been reviewed. So we're not suggesting.
And we know that Green Book comes out on top.
Yeah. Green Book and Elizabethtown are the top two seeds.
Now, we did have some qualifications for the movies we selected this season.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that they checked all of these boxes. In fact, I think one or two of these didn't check any of them.
Yes.
But in general, we are looking at four main categories of, is this something this movie accomplished?
Well, before you say what they are, like, do you agree with what I did here? Like, I put these into a spreadsheet. I basically just arbitrarily chose four categories that I thought would be good measures for what should be considered. Do you think these are four good ones, or did I miss something?
I think they're good ones.
Yeah.
I think you kind of checked the popularity box, the critics box, along with, like, is it something that will appeal to audiences over the long term?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, I guess let's go ahead and reveal what the four categories are, Brad.
So the first category is, was this movie nominated for Best Picture?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought about doing, like, was this nominated for an Oscar in general? But then I would have had to capture a whole bunch of movies on this list. You know, I basically just listed out every movie that qualified for every single category and then narrowed it down from there. And I think that, like, yes, sometimes the Oscar nominations, they snub something that really should have been considered a Best Picture contender. This happened with If Beale Street Could Talk, a movie that I think really should have been nominated. But in general, if it's not going to be a Best Picture nominee, but we're still going to talk about it this year, then that means it hit one of the other categories. So I didn't think that was like the end all be all.
Yeah. What's our next category, Bob?
Well, going the popularity route, is this movie in the IMDb Top 250? Now, again, IMDb is always weighted a little more frequently towards the recent film. And so old movies suffer a lot, but we're only going back 20 years. So a movie it doesn't have to have the staying power of like Casablanca to still be kicking around the bottom tier of the IMDb Top 250.
Yeah, and we're not necessarily worried here with, is it a top 50 movie or a 200 to 250? Just, did it make the top 250 list? And then staying in that realm of popularity, did the film accrue $100 million at the domestic box office? Was this popular enough in the United States of America to make a decent amount of money?
Right. And $100 million, it's nothing to sneeze at, obviously, but like in the era of MCU movies where stuff's making $600 million domestic, 100 mil doesn't seem like a big number. But then you look at some of the movies that came out that were really small movies and got like an Oscar bump. I'm pretty sure a movie like The King's Speech actually did clear 100 mil at the United States box office or something close to that. And then you start realizing, oh, that's a huge hit for a movie of that size. So I think 100 mil is a good place to set this for kind of general, if not popularity, just general knowledge of a movie.
Yeah, I mean, even a movie that might not be the most popular, but like Wonka a year ago made $133 million here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm. That movie made $500 million worldwide.
That's wild.
It's a really good movie.
Man.
It is a book family favorite.
Oh.
My 4-year-old
family friendly.
Obsessed with Wonka.
Look at you go. Man. Timothée Chalamet.
He's killing it, dude. And that takes us to our last category. Is this film part of the Letterboxd Top 250? Now, we have not done Letterboxd stuff on this podcast much because it is
but we're about to.
If you could take IMDb and say, how can I make this more insufferable? It would be Letterboxd. Letterboxd 8 years ago
Bob,
was like...
You love Letterboxd.
No, so here's the thing. I don't use Letterboxd that frequently. Like, I log my movies and I give them a score, but I don't write reviews on Letterboxd. Like, Letterboxd is if you could mash up IMDb and Twitter. It's like people saying really pithy things and trying to get the cleverest take on a movie, and then everybody upvotes that review. And so it's like, it is catching the snobbishness of film Twitter mashed up with the user functionality of IMDb. However, I do think it's a good metric here because it is kind of capturing the film nerd side of things. If
the
it's a movie,
side of things.
If it's a movie that the snooty people like, and it's a movie that the average Joes over on IMDb like, that tells me it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah, 100%. I think that this is a good metric. Like, we have 4 categories, and we're not going to talk for each movie about what categories they hit.
No.
Are we, Bob?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So essentially, you just have to trust us that almost all of these movies scored well in at least one of these categories. Now, there were about 9 or 10 that hit at least 3 of the 4 categories, and they would be movies that you recognize.
For sure. And there was one movie to rule them all, Brad. One movie that hit all 4 categories. And it is perhaps the most recent film on this list as well, or darn near it. It's a movie that came out just last year, swept the Oscars, is on the IMDb Top 250, grossed a whole bunch of money. Letterboxd bros love it. It is the Christopher Nolan film Oppenheimer, and that is what we are kicking off season 9 with.
Yeah, dude, I waited about a year after it came out to finally watch it. Mostly just to piss you off.
Yeah. I saw this movie at least 5 times in theaters, Brad.
Yeah, which is like 15 hours of your time. And that's just sitting in the theater, not driving there.
There are worse ways to spend 15 hours. That movie freaking slaps, Brad.
Yeah, no, that Oppenheimer is incredible. It is going to get a very high score from both Bob and I. And I am so jacked to start the season off with that. After Oppenheimer, we're going to jump back 12 years to watch a little film called The Help.
The Help, a movie that film Twitter does not like The Help, but the general population does. It made a whole bunch of money. I'm pretty sure it's on the IMDb Top 250 still, and it was nominated for Best Picture. So depending on where it's at on IMDb, I think it might have hit 3 of the 4, Brad.
Yeah.
All right, after that, we're jumping into a movie that... I guess we should say we're swinging into a movie that I was pretty cool on the first time I saw it, but that everyone seems to love. It's 2018's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Brad, have you seen any of the Spider-Verse movies yet?
I have not. I tried to get Haley to watch it with me at some point, and the preview was like so flashy, and she was like, that just looks like way too much going on. I am uninterested.
It is the only time in my life, the last 10 minutes of that movie, where I had legitimate sensory overload. where I was like,
not during Tree of Life.
This might trigger a seizure. Like, it was disorienting. And a lot of people loved it, but I couldn't do it, man.
Would you say it's the animated version of a Terrence Malick just flying through
no,
shots?
not even remotely. Terrence Malick moves very slowly. This movie does not.
Well, following Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I'm really excited for this. I feel like 2019 was a really incredible year for film, and I only was able to see a few of the movies that I'm still wanting to come back around to, and one of those will be Ford v. Ferrari.
Ford versus Ferrari is the ultimate dad movie. I mean, it's a buddy comedy. It's about getting stuff done together. It's about America versus the world, and cars go vroom. Like, it is. And it has Matt Damon in it. It's such a good movie, dude.
Are we just going to land on our let's make it a double with Top Gun Maverick?
We might as well.
That would be the ultimate dad movie combo.
I'm already going to ding it a point, though, because it falls victim to this thing that they've been doing with movie titles lately that really pisses me off, that they put a V instead of a VS when they mean versus. And when it's just V, it's like a court case. So you think that Ford v. Ferrari is like Ford is suing Ferrari in court. Yeah, it's not that. It's like Batman v. Superman. That sounds like the lamest court case of all time.
It turns out, lamest movie of all time.
We should have gotten the courtroom version. After Ford versus Ferrari, we are going back 5 more years to 2014 to a movie that caught on like wildfire. I remember seeing it at the local indie movie theater in Cleveland because it wasn't playing anywhere else, and it had gotten really good reviews out of the festivals. And it's a movie called Whiplash. Once that movie hit the mainstream, it just freaking took off. But it was so funny to me because I saw it, I posted about it, on Facebook or something after I saw it, and no one else had heard of this movie. And I was like, this is the best movie I've seen all year. This movie is incredible. I'm so glad that it's caught on, but also it's one of those ones where I'm like, you didn't see this movie in theaters. Like, I hear people saying that now, and I'm like, no, you didn't. I was the only one there. I looked around. You weren't there.
Bob, there were years and years. If any faithful listeners remember guest host in like episodes 3 and 4, Jordan, he's a great friend of mine. And for years, he tried to get me to watch Whiplash. Like, it would be like anytime we had a movie night with friends, he'd be like, anybody up for Whiplash? And I would inevitably every single time be like, oh, that's the one with J.K. Rowling in it, right? And he would just like sigh at me in resignation. Honestly, the way you kind of do, Bob.
Yeah. We have a lot in common, Jordan and I.
You really do.
Let's bring Jordan back for that episode.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, let's get him on. You should ask him if he's willing to join us 9 seasons later.
I'm sure he will.
All right, well, we're revisiting the year 2019 after that to look at the Best Picture winner of that year, a surprise Best Picture winner, but a deserving one, the Korean film Parasite. This is another movie that, like, everybody loves now, but it took a minute for this to catch on in the consciousness. It reminds me a lot of Everything Everywhere All at Once, how that was a really small movie, and word of mouth just kind of took it off. And then by the time you got to the Oscars, it had a really dedicated following of people who'd been pushing for it. That movie picked up momentum at the right time to win its Oscars. And I feel like it's really cemented itself as one of the best movies of the decade since then. I
don't know if you know this, Bob, but I own it.
Do you really?
On Blu-ray as one of the Criterion collections.
Have you watched it?
No, I just randomly bought it, Bob.
Well, I mean, sometimes you bought Seven Samurai before you watched that.
That is true. I did do that. Yes, I did watch Parasite. I actually watched it the same week that you and I watched Memento together.
Oh, gosh. That actually sounds like a decent pairing because they're both just like really twisted movies.
Yeah. I also watched Bicycle Thieves that week. It was a momentous week for my film watching.
Oh my gosh. That's like the week for you, man.
I've never recovered. A movie that has recovered and recovered the franchise in a lot of ways. Skyfall from 2012 is our next movie.
Can I just say, I'm so pumped about this season. We're going back to back to back. Ford v Ferrari, Whiplash, Parasite, Skyfall. Like, what a freaking lineup. What a dude's rule season this is going to be.
And following Skyfall, we have Dune Part 2.
Dune Part 2, our only, to this point, 2024 entry for this season. I'm very excited because Oppenheimer was the only film that checked all 4 boxes. Dune checked like 3.5 boxes. It has not yet been nominated for Best Picture. It's pretty much a lock to, though. So Oppenheimer and Dune 2 are the only 2 movies that will have had that distinction. And I think we'll probably be hitting it, well, let's see, like mid to late November. So as award season is starting to ramp up. I wondered about pushing this till later in award season. But if something else kind of comes up and steals its thunder and it doesn't end up winning the Oscar, that could really backfire. So I'm glad we have it where we do here, Brad.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I am really excited for the next film, one that you've been trying to get me to watch for a long time, 2007's Zodiac.
It is my favorite David Fincher movie. I think it's the best thing he's ever done. It is just like, it's a procedural. It's like dudes working at a newspaper. So it's very much in the vein of like Spotlight or All the President's Men.
High and Low.
No, that's like, well, kind of like High and Low. That's more of like an investigation. But yeah, like it's just guys who work at a newspaper who are tracking a serial killer. It is infused with so much dread and it really captures the sense of panic that San Francisco was in by the Zodiac killer. Just a freaking fantastic movie, man. I cannot wait to watch that.
Yeah, I am super excited for our movie following that. La La Land from 2016. Bob, this is a movie I saw in theaters, absolutely loved. I watched it about a year ago. Dude, I cried almost this entire movie.
Okay, cool.
It's so good.
It's a good movie. It's always been a movie for me that's like, ooh, this is like hinting at greatness, but it's from the same guy that made Whiplash, and Whiplash is like legitimately great. And so La La Land always felt like the slightest letdown to me, even though it's gorgeous and really well made and like well crafted. It's always just felt like, you're not Whiplash. You know what I mean?
You're going to hold that against this movie?
I sure
against
am.
Ryan Gosling?
I sure am, Brad. And that takes us to a movie that I don't think we've ever even mentioned, maybe once on this show. It's called District 9. It was nominated for Best Picture. It's our first, well, I guess Dune Part 2, but aside from Dune, it's our first real sci-fi film. And it's hard sci-fi, man. Like it's aliens who have become colonized on Earth by the humans and forced to live in basically like a ghetto in South Africa, and their attempts to partner up with some humans and get shit done. It is way more than that, but it is just at a basic level. It's like, what if aliens were the stars of a James Cameron action movie? And there you go.
I'm super excited, man.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it pairs up with the following week's movie?
I think anything can pair up with this movie if you really wanted to. We're talking about 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. A movie that the critics just love, man. Like, this is by far the most loved action film of the last 10, 15 years. Even more than like Top Gun Maverick. I like it a lot. I think there's a lot to appreciate here. I'm interested to see what you think, because I don't think you've ever seen a Mad Max movie, have you?
I have never seen any Mad Max films. Not the 80s, not the modern versions. I feel though like I have been hearing about this movie from the moment it came out, and people just never stopped talking about it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's a big Letterboxd movie because it's insufferable. All right, after that, we are going back to 2019 yet again. What a freaking year 2019 was, dude.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, I feel like something in the air knew what was coming, and they were like, guys, we got to get these movies out.
Get them out now. Yeah, something literally in the air. Okay, so we're looking at 2019's 1917, the second Sam Mendes movie on our docket for this season after Skyfall, and one of his best movies, and a movie that was like in pole position to win the Oscar until Parasite kind of swooped in at the last second. I really loved this movie in the theater, and I hyped it up to you for a long time, and you watched it at your house, and then you were like, eh. And I'm like, yeah, dude, it's like a real-time movie that takes place in war. Like, you got to see that in the theater. So I'm interested to see how it holds. Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure I saw that in theaters.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you saw it like you rented it or something.
On my cell phone?
Yes. on your old Nokia phone.
Did you just say I Reddited it?
No, I rented it.
I thought you were mixing up Redbox and Reddit.
Yeah, don't watch movies on Reddit, folks. All right, let's get through these last couple movies and then we'll drink our whiskey. After that, we're going to 2015 to watch two films back to back. The Big Short, which is a fun movie from a director that has fallen out of fashion with the critics, about the housing crash in 2008.
Who's the director?
Adam McKay, the comedy director.
Yeah.
And then we're following that up with Pixar's Inside Out. And quite frankly, I've seen Inside Out 2 like 3 times now, Brad. And I like it better than Inside Out 1. I'm just going to say it.
Hot takes with Bob. And finishing up our first 16 films, we are going to Bob's personal choice. This was a hand-picked selection. Past Lives 2023.
Past Lives. Maybe the least seen movie on this list. Even after I acknowledge that Oppenheimer is like the most deserving Best Picture winner of all time, I still think Past Lives is a better movie than it's still my number 1 from last year, and Oppenheimer is like 1A. But yeah, Past Lives will forever be a part of me from here on out. I describe it to you as brief encounter for the 21st century, and man, I can't wait, dude.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I watched it on an airplane flying out to Colorado. Absolutely loved it. Was slightly distracted by the person in front of me watching Barbie. I would occasionally look at Barbie and be like, wow, I really don't think I want to watch that movie.
You don't. Believe me. All right, man.
All right, dude. Well, let's get to this Bardstown Bourbon Company Silver Oak. What do you say?
That sounds great, man. Let's get to it. This episode is brought to you by Blackwood Distilling. You know at Film and Whiskey we love a good underdog story. Well, let me tell you about Blackwood Distilling. This all started when Guinness McFadden took a long shot and won the Kentucky Derby with Country House at 65-1 odds back in 2019. He turned that victory into Blackwood Distilling with a little help from the Justins at Justin's House of Bourbon. And together they've made something special. Luxury toasted bourbon and the first ever triple-barreled toasted rye, both at barrel strength. We're talking about deep, rich flavors, creamy bodies, and that classic Kentucky warmth. If you're a bourbon or a rye guy, you're going to want to check out Blackwood. Batch 4 of their bourbon and batch 3 of the rye are hitting shelves in Kentucky, Florida, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming right now. More states coming soon, so head over to blackwooddistillingco.com. That's blackwooddistillingco.com. Hit that shop button and get your hands on a bottle. Thanks, Blackwood. All right, so today we're checking out Bardstown Bourbon Company collaborative series, Silver Oak. This is a blend of straight bourbon whiskey that's finished in Cabernet barrels from the Silver Oak Winery in California. They have a lot of copy on their website about just how cool and how great Silver Oak is. But for our purposes, Brad, this is a blend of 6 different whiskeys, originating from Kentucky, Tennessee, Indiana, and Georgia. The oldest in this blend is 14 years old. The youngest is 9 years old. There's a variety of mash bills going on here. If you'd like to break down the entire thing, you can find the blend and all of its proportions on the Bardstown Bourbon Company's website. But Brad, we have a task ahead of us, which is determining how good is this thing? And crucially, how does it compare to the Bardstown Bourbon Company we just had a couple weeks ago? Because that was darn good.
Yeah, it really was. We have a good history with wine finished. Specifically, is this a Cab Sauv finish?
Yep.
Yeah, so specifically with Cab Sauv, the reason we fell in love with Bardstown Bourbon Company was their Pfeiffer Pavitt. Now, we were informed by friend of show David Thomas Tao a few weeks ago that has a little bit of a controversial history within the world of whiskey tasters. Some people loved it. Some people didn't love it. I'm really excited to try this new iteration of a Cab Sauv finished Bardstown product.
I should say, it doesn't say Cab Sauv. It just says Cabernet barrels. So I don't know. Maybe not. We'll see. But okay. I do know that I have taken notes on this thing, and I'm also drinking it again live just to try to confirm that I wasn't going crazy the first time. Brad, on the nose, this thing is just rich, deep caramel and brown sugar, especially brown sugar. Like I underlined brown sugar. Lots of molasses for me. A lot of black pepper on the nose when I first popped this. And honestly, not a lot of grape influence. Like I didn't get a ton of wine character on this, but more of like really rich, decadent bourbon notes. It kind of reminded me of that Nomad Outland whiskey and how that was like if you took Scotch and just made it 50 times sweeter. It almost feels like the wine finish here did the same thing with the bourbons they were using.
I don't know, Bob. For me, I feel like this has a really strong sherry note on the nose for me. And then it gets really like Christmas spicy. Like there's cinnamon and nutmeg. I feel like there's like almost a candied almond type of vibe going on. And I won't disagree with you. There is caramel. There is like really deep, dark brown sugar.
Yeah, molasses for sure.
That, like, yeah, that is 100% there. But for me, that sherry really comes through to give it those grape characteristics.
Yeah, I would give this an 8 out of 10 on the nose. I don't know if you put scores to your notes here, Brad.
Yeah, I actually said the same thing, 8 out of 10.
I'm also at an 8 on the taste. I just said the taste is like a very dark bourbon. And then I put in quotes like I was workshopping names like Bourbon Noir and Bourbon Midnight. It just reminds me of like bourbon at nighttime. I don't know how else to explain it. There's a lot of brown sugar. There's a little bit of plum, and I got quite a bit of raisin on this as well, which is something that we tasted on that high wheat with David Thomas Tao a couple weeks ago as well. There's a tiny bit of Cabernet here at the end, but I think mostly where that finish is taking on some body here is in imparting that oak influence, because it's like a little bit tannic for me. It got quite a bit, I don't know if I want to call it bitter, but it was like that toasted oak kind of flavor right on the back of my palate when I went to swallow. I like this a lot, but I think I'm just going to stick it an 8 out of 10.
I am with you on the score, 8 out of 10. I think that what I interpreted as sherry almost turned into like a cherry cordial for me. There's caramel, there's brown sugar, vanilla becomes much more prominent. It almost reminded me of like a really dark, rich toffee. I'm a really big fan of this, Bob.
Man, we are in really different places in what we're picking up on this. On the finish, I said that this almost reminded me of like a really dusty bourbon. Not a dusty like an old bourbon, but sometimes we have tasting notes where we're like, oh, this reminds us of like an old dusty barn or like sawdust or something like that. I got that a little bit on the finish here. Which is something that I was trying to pinpoint which distillery does that for us. Is it Heaven Hill products? Is it like Four Roses products? I think it's Heaven Hill. And if I'm looking at the blend here, I suspect there's some Heaven Hill distillate in this blend. So maybe that's what I'm picking up. I think the fruitiest part of the experience was the finish here. But again, there's a little bit of slight bitterness from that sour oak, that toasted oak flavor that I don't like a lot of times. I'm going to come down to a 7.5 on the finish, Brad.
Oh, I actually think this is where we're finally splitting ways, Bob. I think this is an 8.5 on the finish.
Oh, wow.
Like all of the flavors I enjoyed on the first two portions of this whiskey just felt like they warmed and they became a little more rich and a little more deep on the finish. I think that the nutmeg and cinnamon notes came back around from the nose. I think the toffee turned into like a really nice soft butterscotch. And the oakiness did come through in the finish in a really nice way to balance out how things were moving in a sweeter direction for me. I really liked this finish a lot.
What was your score?
8.5.
8.5. All right, on balance, here's what I wrote down. As all Bardstown Bourbon Company whiskeys tend to be, this is really solid. And I feel like I kind of have to grade on a curve a little bit with Bardstown because everything's good. Like the worst whiskey from them I've had is still like a 7 out of 10 on my scale. And I think that this is really well balanced. It's probably the most bourbon-y of their finished bourbons that I've had in a long time, meaning that I didn't get a lot of the wine finish on this. It just kind of tasted like a bourbon that had some parts of it amplified by whatever they were finishing in. I wish there was a little more wine character to this, but overall, I think it's still really good. I'm going to give it a 7.5 on balance.
I think it's an 8.5 on balance, Bob. There is a beautiful complexity of flavors here that it's not an overwhelming amount of complexity, but it takes the flavors it has, mixes them together beautifully, and gives you a really great drinking experience.
All right, that takes us to value. This is one of their more expensive offerings, Brad. This is $160 MSRP. They've been doing some of their collaboration series or collaborative series at this price point, which is like, it's not unfortunate. It's just a tougher sell to the average consumer. So you not only have to say, okay, is this a really good product? Would you pay $160 for this? And could you feasibly convince someone else to pay $160 for this? I think that's where I'm going to pull back on the reins a little bit here, Brad. I think this is only about a 5 out of 10 on value. And it's because I've had other things at this very price point from Bardstown that I like better than this. Now, is this on its own a $160 whiskey? Yeah, I think it's absolutely worth I don't think it's overpriced at all. It's a justifiable price for what they're doing and what you're getting. But among their bourbons priced at this point, it's not my favorite. So I'm just going to give it a 5 here.
Would you say that the Amroot collaboration is kind of the...
Oh, it's like leaps and bounds. Yeah, for sure. And I think the Pfeiffer Pavitt, when they were first selling it, was like $120. So I don't even know. Like, I feel like I still might take the Pfeiffer Pavitt over this, Brad.
I think I would too. I think this is a good value. I came out a little higher on my flavor scores than you did, but I'm kind of with you. I would give this a 6.5 on value. I think it's worth it, but for me, like 7 out of 10 on value is when I start to go, okay, this is a good bottle of whiskey at the price point. It's just below that for me. Mm-hmm. I am coming out to a 39.5 out of 50.
I'm at a 36 out of 50. So we weren't as far apart as we were making it sound. That takes us to a 75.5 out of 100 or a 37.75 out of 50. This is well into the territory where we would start recommending that you try or buy. It doesn't quite hit the 40 out of 50 mark where it becomes a no-brainer recommendation from us. So it's definitely a thumbs up. Brad, in what form would you recommend getting this? Is it worth a pour? Is it worth a bottle? What would you do?
I would say, I mean, you know, that always depends on where you're at. I would say this is worth splitting with a friend. Mm-hmm. I would say drop $80 each, enjoy a bottle with a friend. If you're in that level of like, yes, I want to enjoy some fine whiskey, I want to have a good night with a friend, I think this might be worth that.
All right, so there you have it. We really like this whiskey. This is not a huge spoiler coming from Bardstown Bourbon Company. They continue to do great things. I don't understand how they can do so much. Like, honestly, they turn on the money machine and stuff comes out, man. They're doing a lot at Bardstown Bourbon Company.
Yeah. If you've never been down there, please make your way down to Bardstown, Kentucky. Check out the distillery, do a tour, eat some food there. It is an incredible experience that you will never regret.
All right, man. What do you say we reveal the last half of season 9?
Let's get to it. All right, Bob. We have 16 more movies. I think what I want to do is I'm going to reveal 4 at a time, and you're going to just give me your, 3-word summary for each. All right?
Yep.
All right. 2019's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 2015's Creed, 2022's Everything Everywhere All at Once, and 2019's Joker.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Need to revisit.
Ooh.
I was really cool on it the first time.
Yeah.
Creed.
How about Creed?
All-time, this is one word, sports movie classic.
Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Doesn't hold up.
Oh, that's a hot take.
It's a good movie, but it's not going to age well. I watched it a second time and I was like, oh yeah, 10 years from now, we're going to be like, we were caught up in the hype on this one.
All right. And your favorite movie of the season, Joker.
Folie à deux.
Adieu.
All right, here's your 4, Brad. 2012's Argo, 2013's The Wolf of Wall Street, 2015's Spotlight, and 2014's Her.
Argo, I'm going to say Gotta Get 'Em Out. Do you get it?
Yeah, that was a Brad Explains. I like it.
That was a...
That's what we should institute this season is 1 second Brad Explains.
I'm thinking of it to the tune of Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta get him out. Gotta get him out. Wolf of Wall Street. Gotta take some Quaaludes.
Yeah. Candle in ass.
Spotlight. No clue. And Her. Gotta talk to some Scarlett Johansson, man.
ScarJo.
She is incredible.
Oh, what a voice. I can see. I can see why my guy Joaquin was getting horny for his computer. That's all I'm saying.
Right?
You know?
Yeah.
Understandable predicament to be in.
All right. Your 4 movies are 2019's Jojo Rabbit, 2013's Prisoners, 2007's Ratatouille, and 2011's Moneyball.
Jojo Rabbit. This is more than 3 words. Why do people hate this?
People hate that movie?
Oh, dude. Like, film Twitter and Letterboxd, they hate Jojo Rabbit. They hate it.
They don't like Jewish Hitler?
They don't like Jewish Hitler.
What the heck, man?
Prisoners. Denis' best film? ?
Ooh. Denis who?
Denis Villeneuve.
Villeneuve.
Or as we say in the States, Dennis Villanova.
Like the college.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Ratatouille. I mean, one of Pixar's best. It's just, it's so good. And then Moneyball, all time, this is one word, sports movie classic.
Yeah, it's weird, Bob. You had 2 of those.
I know. All right, Brad. And then to round out the season, we've got a couple very recent ones here. 2023's The Holdovers, then throwing it back to 2010 for How to Train Your Dragon. Throwing it all the way forward on the dragon theme, we're going with Godzilla -1. And then we're going to round things out with 2014's John Wick.
The Holdovers. This might be the hottest take of the entire episode. So I'm glad you guys have stuck around for this. Better Dead Poets Society.
Before you move on, hold on. I reserve the right for us to call an audible and throw this back in the schedule around Christmas time. Because it's a Christmas movie. Like,
oh, 100%.
Like, I feel like doing this in May is not going to be helpful to anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, if you want to push that back, I am A-okay with that.
All right, cool.
How to Train Your Dragon, perhaps the best non-Pixar animated film.
Yeah, that was a long 3 words.
It was. Godzilla -1, Godzilla Go Boom.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
John Wick, Pew Pew Pew.
I'm going to love these Brad Explains, man.
It's going to be a good time, Bob.
All right, folks, there you have it. There's our season 9 lineup. We will be pairing these with whiskey during the episodes. And we want to say thank you, first of all, to our friend Zach Johnston, former writer at Uprocks, who got rid of a whole bunch of whiskey when he recently moved and gave us bunches and bunches of it. So all of the whiskeys we're drinking this season, I believe, except one, were provided by our friend Zach. A lot of these whiskeys are very pricey. They are unattainable even by us. And so we're going to be talking about how pricey they are. Usually,
would you say that they're modern classics, Bob?
Well, usually we're like the value guys, but this season we're like the guys in tuxedos with our pinkies up.
We're Parks and Rec. Treat yourself.
I'm looking at one of them right now. It's the Macallan 31 year, Brad.
Oh.
And you and I have to find a way to split 50 mLs of it. So
I was going to say that is almost as old as us, Bob.
Oh my gosh. Almost. That's how old we are, man.
That's how old we're
are. We're like, geez, that whiskey's so old. So then it's not even as old as we are.
Oh, man.
All right, guys, we want to know what you think of our lineup. You can let us know which film you are most looking forward to by talking to us on any one of our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Film Whiskey.
Or you can join the conversation on Discord. We will be posting this year's lineup and having a conversation about it. So if you want to join that conversation, you can find a link at the end of every single one of our show notes.
But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.